Now, I'm going to be straight honest with you in this video, and I'm going to go right off the bat with the topic as well. I'm speaking on behalf of all the PC players out there. I know your pain, I know what you're going through, and I know what's going on. I've been playing PC when I was young, and there's most reasons why I moved over. Modern AAA developers will never fix optimization issue for one simple reason. Optimization takes time and money. Time can be spent making the next product, and money expenditure must be minimized. They're effectively outsourcing optimization into the GPU manufacturers and Unreal for free. C-suits and shareholders will never allow money to be put back into optimization because it means bonuses and payouts will decrease. What's crazy to me, I get more frames per second on Red Dead Redemption 2 with almost max settings than on Black Ops 6 with the lowest possible settings. Red Dead Redemption 2 still runs perfectly on my 2015 Xbox One model, my guy. What makes it worse are the types of people who defend this shit and say, just upgrade your parts, sheesh, I have a 4090, so you need to get with the times, quit being a poor player and expecting the developers to cater to your old potato PC specs that are 3 years too old for modern games because you need to have the latest and greatest for proper gaming. To completely dismiss the issue. Like, they don't want to hear that even people with similar specs as them are having trouble running these new games, and that it doesn't matter if the 5XXX series drop tomorrow with cards and people rush to buy the slop. They're still going to have issues running the games because they're not understanding that they are poorly optimized. There are still people that would say 4K being the mainstream resolution. Like, in what world do you live in, buddy? Literally less than 5% of people use 4K or higher. 56% are sitting at 1080p and about 20% at 1440p. Huh? Developers forget that when they're making these games, they're making them on the newest specs available and begin setting those as recommended specs. They don't ever bother to check out what most average consumers are using in their builds to maybe get an idea on where they can be on average for max sales. But instead, all they care about is getting in good with companies like Nvidia for their games and pushing their hardware as a quid pro quo situation that most ignore for some reason, and I don't know why. Tack on how the industry is hiring people in the massa that can barely understand how to properly implement it and work around TWA. They just throw everything into scenes and crack things up, then throw upscaling on it to cover up their mess because they don't know what they are doing. No one wants to take the time to go over their code and properly optimize it. So instead, they blame the consumers and make them feel as if it's their PC parts that aren't good enough with the lousy, well, it's a demanding game using new technology, you need better specs, and of course those specs are going to cost more because that's what you have to pay for this stuff. That I've actually seen people repeat that isn't even remotely true. It's just people trying to justify their purchase while repeating lines fed to them by the industry and companies themselves so they don't feel like they have been rammed up the ass to rare building a rig over $2,000 that can't even get above 30-60 frames per second in a AAA modern game. We need more people calling this shit out and holding more developers accountable. Especially when they charge over $60 for games nowadays when using Unreal Engine 5, and not even hiring people that know the basics to have the game run properly. One should be able to have specs from 3 to 5 years ago that can run the games we have now. It's not a consumer issue with their cards, it's an industry issue. And people have really got to stop defending the developers and companies that push this nonsense as being a standard. Another thing that is important to mention is the fact that max settings are often really pushing the hardware to the limit. Often they are even designed for future hardware. I believe that the extreme requirements of the most extreme of settings are justified. You can just lower, for example, the MSWA and the SSAO and get almost the same quality at double the frame rate. I can decide whether I want the highest resolution textures or something like ray tracing or SSAO. But if I crack every slider to the right, it will not run on even the best hardware. I used a TV back then when I was playing on PC as my gaming display and sit pretty close to it. So a AA is important for me. But I am willing to trade it for high-res textures as I don't really notice the difference when actually playing. And I have the option to decide this for myself. If a maxed out game were to run great, it would mean that all the settings need to fit into a limited performance scope and every single setting at max would need to be worse. But I don't want that. I want to decide what is important for me and get the best possible look for myself. It actually makes me fucking cringe so hard knowing the developers who remade Silent Hill 2 have missed the point of all the optimization techniques and visual effects of the original and what made it so highly praised from a performance standpoint. Still rendering stuff within the fog that you can't see is a huge joke for me. But that's what developers are doing nowadays, rendering all this pointless shit we can't see. You can't even just drop from ultra to high in most cases. In my experience, high and ultra have a negligible performance change on a 4090 at 4K. You gotta go to medium, which then butchers and a lot of the effects. What's sad about Silent Hill 2's performance is that the fog was initially created to hide the short straw distance, possible on the PlayStation 1. Now the fog is costly to performance and hides already rendered level geometry. How have developers forgotten such a basic rule of optimization? The answer is because of how advanced Unreal Engine is. They think they can just enable the latest untested features, make high quality models and animations, place tons of light sources, and the engine will handle the rest. The issue is primarily Unreal Engine 5, but I wouldn't say that Unreal Engine is basically the boogeyman of it all. It's part of the problem. There are so many unoptimized aspects of that engine that I don't even know where to start. It's at a point now where when a non-Unreal Engine 5 big budget game is announced, I get excited because I know there's a good chance it will at least run better. I feel like the biggest one is engines like Unreal utilize GUI systems for their coding, which is great for new developers starting out, but it's resulting in a generation of developers who don't really understand the code that they are complying, and therefore can't effectively optimize it and are therefore resorting to shortcuts like TWA and upscaling to make up for this. Another result of this is that there seem to be less and less developers that are actually capable of creating their own engine. All they know how to do is manipulate the UI of one that's been packed up for them, basically, meaning there is going to be less and less competition for the companies like Unreal. And the incentiveness Epic from optimizing their systems to be more performant and competitive because everyone is going to be forced to use their engine anyway. Now this is one of the big one, and I think the biggest one of all, guys, and I think a lot of people forget about this one. And I think there's one thing that players forget about all of this. Money. Oh yes, it's money, baby. Most of these games that are incomprehensible unoptimized are from big companies, baby. We still have well-made games on the smaller side of the industry, of course. Ironically, since they have less money to invest on the development, but that's it. Money. Big companies, especially the ones publicly traded, need to feed the parasites the shareholders. They want money no matter what. It is cheaper to release a game without spending working time on optimizing it. The game launches faster, cost less, profit the same, and make the shareholders' graphics look good. Also, if the games keep getting harder to render on a faster pace, we need to buy hardware more often to keep up. And okay, it's more money for the industry. What a surprise! I can bet an arm the parasites, something in my throat now, the shareholders on game companies also have investments on hardware companies. So they profit twice, basically, and we lose twice. Just a natural progression of capitalism as usual. Right? Right, guys? Right? The best way to understand how optimized a game is to try porting it to a system that doesn't seem like it would be able to play it. Resident Evil 2 on the N64 is a perfect example of this, really. Angel Studios managed to take content that needed 2 discs on the PlayStation 1 and cram all of it into a single 64 megabyte cartridges with barely any difference between them. The ported game was 95% smaller in terms of data size compared to the original PlayStation 1 version. A phenomenal achievement that all new developers should study and learn from it.